Yes!
When Destiny 2 first released, I was completely against the thought of any Destiny 1 exotic weapon or armor making a return to Destiny 2. There was a handful of D1 exotics that came back in the first season of D2, and combined with the already lackluster state of the game back then, to say that I was disappointed would have been a massive understatement. But as Destiny 2 grew, it improved, and my views on returning D1 exotics changed. And this change in heart derives from how excellently each returning D1 exotic was handled. And despite the fact that Bungie did a lot of screwing up, I can confidently confirm the approach that Bungie took with these exotics is something that they actually did right. Because as far as I'm concerned, most, if not all of the original exotics from D1 maintain their most unique attributes, but they performed so much better in Destiny 2 than they did in Destiny 1. After Bungie and Activision parted ways, Bungie made it apparent that creating one big Destiny universe is one of their plans on the horizon. This is exactly what led to Destiny 1 exotics finding their way into Destiny 2 in the first place. I had my fair share of exotic weapons and armor in Destiny 1, but there was always one particular exotic weapon I always liked that fell beneath the radar a bit. This was an exotic scout rifle known as the Boolean Gemini. And in this video, I want to talk about what the Boolean Gemini was and if it would be a good candidate as a returning exotic weapon in Destiny 2. Now, if you never played D1 or never heard of this weapon, this is definitely a topic that you don't want to miss out on. But with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and get it in. Boolean Gemini was a kinetic damage scout rifle belonging to the 180 RPM precision frame family. Now, if you watch my previous Could This Weapon Return in Destiny 2 videos, one of my most commonly recurrent statements is that, quote, this archetype wasn't referred to as such in Destiny 1 due to the lack of intrinsic perks on legendary weapons to denote weapon archetypes, end quote. Now, I felt the need to mention this because it's kind of tiresome to repeat myself, but for the sake of convenience, I refer to Boolean Gemini as a 180 RPM scout because that's the exact archetype it will belong to if it were in Destiny 2. Now, Bungie has exhibited that they are not above changing the weapon's archetype in Destiny 2 to further differentiate it from its D1 version. For instance, Corrective Measure was a 900 RPM machine gun in D1, while its D2 version belongs to the 450 RPM family of machine guns. The Supremacy in Destiny 2 is a 140 RPM sniper rifle, but it fired at 90 rounds per minute in Destiny 1. But if the goal isn't to improve the viability and appeal of Boolean Gemini, I'm almost for certain that it would still be a 180 RPM scout in Destiny 2. But moving on, let's take a look at this weapon's perks. Intrinsically, it has high caliber rounds. And if you weren't already aware, high caliber rounds makes anything on the receiving end flinch like it's no tomorrow. Now, when this weapon originally released in the 2015 Taken King expansion, it didn't have this perk or an intrinsic perk at all. If I recall correctly, this perk wasn't added until September 2016, and it's high a year later in the Rise of Iron expansion. Its first trait perk is known as Unflinching, and it states that it's easy to aim this weapon while under fire. Now, I don't recall Unflinching being a perk that was all the rage back in D1, but flinch has always sucked, no matter which way you slice the cake. So I would rather have a method to combat flinch, even if its benefits are minute, as opposed to having nothing at all. Now, in Destiny 2, we have a perk known as No Distractions, with a description worded similarly to that of Unflinching, but the effects of these perks differ slightly. Unflinching provides passive benefits, while the effects of No Distractions are active for a short period of time. Now, Boolean Gemini was unique in the sense that it had two exotic perks known as One Way and Or Another. One Way states that it provides bonus agility on precision kills, stacks up to 3 times, while Or Another states that it provides bonus armor on non-precision kills, and it also stacks up to 3 times. It's important to know that what's known as agility and armor in Destiny 1 is known as mobility and resilience in Destiny 2. The names are different, but they function exactly the same. I'll be honest when I say that I was never a fan of either one of these perks because they're pretty lackluster. Believe me when I say that extra movement speed and health is always great, but the words powerful or viable don't come to mind when I think of either one of these perks. Boolean Gemini tasks you to get 3 precision kills to achieve a movement bonus, which is a lot of work for something so bland, especially when compared to the likes of Mida Multi-Tool, a weapon that grants a similar if not identical movement speed bonus, but the most prominent difference is that you don't have to do anything to activate this perk. Mida Multi-Tool's movement speed bonus is completely passive, which frees up its other perks to provide other benefits. Boolean Gemini's Or Another perk is just worse. Now, to proc it, you have to kill enemies with non-precision kills in order to receive an armor bonus. A non-precision kill is achieved from shooting an enemy anywhere else but the head or one of their crit spots. You know, I feel ridiculous explaining this because it's so obvious, but I feel as if this is the only way to explain how pathetic this perk is. But it literally forces you to deliberately shoot at anywhere else except your target's crit spot. My question is, who in their right mind thought that it was a good idea to design a perk that rewards you for deliberately going for body shots? This is about as counterintuitive as it gets, and there's probably a million and one ways that I could slander this perk, but I don't even see the point because it pretty much does it to itself. Now, since both perks have to be selected individually, you would never be able to take advantage of both of them at the same time. Combining both of these perks into one single perk and referring to it as one way or another would have been a much better route to take, but Boolean Gemini would have still been perceived as a meager exotic weapon. There's a couple of other things I want to talk about regarding this weapon's perks, but I'll speak on that later. Fun fact, Boolean Gemini was originally meant to be released in the House of Wolves DLC, but was delayed to be released in the succeeding Taken King expansion. It was originally meant to be named the 347 Vesta Dynasty, and aside from that interesting tidbit of information and the number itself emblazoned on the side of the weapon, I haven't been able to find out if the number 347 has any other significance. If the name Vesta Dynasty rings a bell, but you can't put your finger on where you heard it from, you're definitely thinking of the Vestian Dynasty, a sidearm that was originally introduced in Destiny 1's House of Wolves DLC, coincidentally the same era that Boolean Gemini was originally slated to release in. The Vestian Dynasty returned in Destiny 2's Forsaken expansion and was wielded by Petra Venj. So if you came to the conclusion that Boolean Gemini's original name was given to another weapon, only to adopt a new name in the expansion release after the one it was originally supposed to release in, you would be correct. Also, I wanted to note that its perks One Way and Or Another had their names changed as well. Originally, One Way was known as David and Or Another was known as Goliath. You probably already know this, but David and Goliath were characters from the Bible, and it's pretty obvious that religious connotation is always perceived as too controversial, so they decided to change the names of both of these perks instead of running the risk of offending anybody. But back to it. If you want to know how I personally felt or feel about the Boolean Gemini, I would say that it isn't by any means a viable weapon, and there isn't a single part of me that doesn't understand that, but I don't necessarily dislike it either. Most, if not all, legendary scout rifles in Destiny 1 were pretty good, and scout rifles as a whole were one of the most frequently used weapon types in PvE. Three of my personal favorites were the Cryptic Dragon, Hung Jury, and Vision of Confluence. The latter two weapons were reintroduced in Destiny 2, but all three of these weapons belong to the same archetype as Boolean Gemini, so Boolean Gemini gets a plus for being a part of my personal favorite scout rifle archetype. Accompanying that, Boolean Gemini has always been aesthetically appealing. Even though I'm not a fan of the color blue, its blue and yellow coloration puts me in the mind of University of Michigan's colors. And being from Michigan, I always thought that this was pretty cool. Now, have you ever seen the Boolean Gemini's sights? This weapon uses the sights known as Red Dot EOS in Destiny 1. The Red Dot EOS is inspired by EOTech holographic sights, and in every shooter game where this sight can be used as a weapon attachment, I never pass it up. These are all completely subjective and have nothing to do with this weapon's performance and viability. And even if it was one of my all-time favorite exotics, I would admit that I only like it for personal reasons and wouldn't go out of my way defending it because admittedly, it's not a powerful weapon by any means. I mentioned earlier that the One Way and Or Another perk should have been one single perk. This would have been a lot more ideal, but I doubt that this would have made Boolean Gemini more incentivizing to use. And if it did, it probably would have been used by just a little bit more. But I've always liked the fact that this weapon provided the option to choose between two different perks, but their benefits are so nominal, I've always saw these two perks as one perk split into two separate halves. As insinuated before, extra armor and movement speed is great and all, but I can't stress how strongly I dislike how they're executed. As a single perk, it could have been handled many different ways, but this is what I came up with. One Way or Another. Rapid precision hits grant increased movement speed, weapon reload speed, and resilience for a short amount of time. Okay, I'll explain how things work. Now, if you land 3 precision hits in a row, you'll receive increased walking speed, jump height, and jump distance, and a small boost of resilience. This perk will retain the 10-second timer of the original One Way and For Another perks and can be refreshed by landing another 3 rapid precision hits. I wanted to mention that this perk will remain active even if you switch weapons, and your other equipped weapons will be able to take advantage of the increased reload speed as well. However, only precision hits from Boolean Gemini will be able to reset the 10-second timer. This perk would make you incredibly difficult to kill because you will be faster, tankier, and if used in PvP, you will be able to remain within gunfires much longer. If used in PvE, this weapon will perform amazingly, especially against raid bosses. You can shoot the boss 3 times in its crit spot, Switch to your preferred weapon to deal DPS and take advantage of the increased reload speed and resilience. During DPS phases against many of the bosses in a PvE endgame, you'll either be taking damage from the boss itself or the adds that it summons, so the extra resilience would make shrugging off some of that damage less of a hassle. The extra reload speed would really come in handy when your main DPS weapon needs to reload to get a little bit more damage in for that current DPS phase. Now, I highly doubt that Bungie would ever do this, but Boolean Gemini definitely deserves a second wind. I think what bothers me the most is that Boolean Gemini never fulfilled any particular role. It was just exotic for the sake of being exotic, and it pretty much stops there. It never had a notable attribute that would have made it memorable. For instance, when you think of Icebreaker, the first thing that pops into your head would be its infinite ammo. When you think of Suros Regime, you probably get flashbacks of how insanely powerful it was in the earliest days of Destiny 1's PvP. And if you think that comparing Boolean Gemini to these weapons is upping the ante too far, it's really not. Exotic gear should be as powerful as it is unique. Again, I said powerful, not game-breakingly overpowered. You can only wield one exotic weapon at a time, and I always told myself that if I'm gonna be restricted to using one type of weapon, it has to have a high enough power ceiling to justify using it. Because uniqueness alone isn't gonna win an exotic weapon any awards or provide any usefulness. So yeah, I definitely think that Boolean Gemini should return. It was never given a chance in Destiny 1, and since Bungie has made it evident that they're more than capable of bringing Destiny 1 weapons back with a bang, why would it be unfair to assume that Boolean Gemini wouldn't get the same service? But yeah, everybody, that does it for this one. Boolean Gemini was a very lackluster and forgettable exotic, but it's more than worthy of receiving a second chance at Destiny 2. I would love to see how Bungie handles it if plans of it returning are actually in the making. But anyways, if you made it to the end of this video and enjoyed what you watched, do me a favor and thumb rest to that like button till it turns blue. And if you're new to my neck of the woods, go ahead and subscribe to the channel and click that bell icon so you don't ever miss a video of the most elite gaming content. But with that being stated, 1LHD is over now. Y'all take it easy.
Can redeem you and me. Don't you wanna feel something? And oh, I miss loving you, but I need to live my own truth. I wanna feel it all brand new. I found a little something from Miss Angelou. Take the good and hold it near to you, and let go of all that burdens you.